All the way back in version 1.0, an artifact set known as Lava Walker was released. In terms of gameplay, it wasn't really meta, but it did do its job as a temporary set for a few characters. But what lore players found enticing was its mentions of a lost area known as the Mare Javari. Not much was revealed about this place, or the Lava Walker, for a very long time, but after 5 years, we finally got some answers from the world quest, The Last Survivor of Tenochtitlan, featuring none other than our old friend Enjo. So for this episode of Character Creator, we're gonna design a kit for Enjo, using his lore connections to synergize with the Lava Walker artifact set. As always, additional info is down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado... Actually, one more thing. Recently, I got this adorable Furina-style desktop pet. When I'm working on videos or playing some games, it's kinda like I have a little buddy keeping me company. You want one for yourself? Or maybe you want to commission an artist for your own OCs? Then let me introduce you to Draw Market, a global art and commissioning platform. They have tons of affordable options for whatever creative work you like. And rest assured, all of the work done is human-made, no AI. Going back to the desktop pets, they don't just sit around on your screen. They also come with toggles for unique expressions or visuals. For example, little buddy, where are your little buddies?
The show begins!
And Furina's not the only design that's available. There are so many different character options, many of them from your favorite gacha games. The desktop pets are available for super cheap, and these are pre-made, so the model is ready for use immediately after purchase. If you want to get one for yourself, or if you want to see more of what Draw Market provides, then click the link in my description or pinned comment. Thank you again to Draw Market for sponsoring this video, and now, without further ado, let's get started. The Lava Walker set has two bonuses. First is the 2-piece, which provides a 40% pyro resistance bonus. Second is the 4-piece, which provides 35% damage bonus against pyro-affected enemies. Pyro resistance is a stat that appears on the snapshot menu, which technically means it could be utilized for some kind of stat scaling boost. I already did a similar concept where I turned Guizhong into a shield strength scaling character, so this is nothing new for my channel. Aside from boosting its stats with pyro resistance, we need to respect the original use of the stat, which is reducing the amount of pyro damage a character takes. The 4-piece bonus revolves around the idea that Enjo is run in teams that can maintain a pyro aura. That way he can deal higher damage with his kit. So we have 3 design factors: turn pyro resistance into a direct stat scaling boost, create a mechanic that allows Enjo to utilize the original use of pyro resistance, and design him in a way that incentivizes teams where pyro auras are the prevalent aura. Enjo is gonna be a pyro sword user. I know, he's an Abyss Lector and they're known for their books, but when I went down the weapons list, there weren't a lot of catalyst synergies, but there were a pretty good amount of sword synergies. His Ascension stat is gonna be a 19.2% crit rate bonus, and his intended role is that of an off-field pyro DPS. Being an off-fielder, I gave him at least one form of team utility, but he's gonna be similar to Inefa or Emily, where his kit is like 90% damage oriented. Onto his moveset. For Enjo's skill, he deals an instance of AoE pyro damage and creates a dark fire furnace that follows the active character around. When party members deal damage, the dark fire furnace deals a coordinated attack that deals pyro damage on that enemy. This damage is considered skill damage. Each enemy can have this triggered on them once every 2.5 seconds, with independent cooldowns per enemy. The skill has an 18-second cooldown, lasts for 22 seconds, so there should be no issues with uptime. It also generates 5 pyro particles, but the next section will be about his unique energy source, so the particles are more for the team, not himself. What is Enjo's unique energy, and why am I giving him this mechanic in the first place? Well, lore-wise, as someone who dabbles in the Abyss, I doubt he would use the natural system that Teyvat uses for his power. He'd have something similar to Skirk, who also has a unique energy system due to her use of the Abyss. Enjo's energy is called Embered Knowledge. You can gain Embered Knowledge in 2 different ways. When party members deal damage to a pyro-affected enemy, Enjo gains 2 Embered Knowledge, and this can occur once every 0.1 seconds. Alternatively, when party members trigger a pyro reaction, or deal pyro/dendro damage to a burning enemy, they will generate 6 Embered Knowledge. This effect can occur once every 1.5 seconds. On to the burst. Upon casting, Enjo deals AoE pyro damage and heals himself by 1% of his max HP for every point of Embered Knowledge consumed. He will also summon a Dark Fire Furnace if it's not already active. If it is, he'll simply refresh its duration, which further reduces the uptime issues. For the damage portion, Enjo activates the Brand of Abyssal Flame on himself, siphoning his own life energy to power the Dark Fire Furnace. Every 1 second, Enjo will take self-inflicted pyro damage based on 6% of his max HP. This form of pyro damage can only be affected by pyro resistance. If he successfully takes pyro damage through this method, the Dark Fire Furnace will also expel intense heat, dealing AoE pyro damage to nearby enemies based on his attack. When Enjo is at or below 30% HP, he will no longer deal pyro damage onto himself, and as such, will not activate the AoE pyro damage attacks from the Dark Fire Furnace. The ICD is every other hit, which is a 2-second rate. It'll be an 18-second cooldown and a 22-second duration. It's also worth noting, while the skill's coordinated attack is considered skill damage, the interval hits from Enjo's burst are considered burst damage. The self-inflicted pyro damage is a mechanic I made a while back for my Ron May video, where I labeled the damage as raw elemental damage. Similar to the physical damage hit from Ocean Hued Clam, this damage can't be affected by damage bonuses, crit, or defense. It can only be affected by its relevant resistance stat. Enjo's self-damage is the exact same system. The only way to reduce this is by giving him pyro resistance bonuses. As an off-fielder, he's not in any danger of dying from this mechanic, but this is where the original use of pyro resistance comes in. Enjo will stop doing his burst hits when he reaches 30% max HP or below. If you build him with no pyro resistance, he can deal around 12 hits of his burst before it stops ticking. Considering his rotations range around 18 to 20 seconds, this uptime is pretty bad. But let's say he gets around 50% pyro resistance. Suddenly, his self-damage gets heavily reduced, and this equals only 3% of his max HP. By the end of his rotation cycle, he'll end at around 40% of his max HP, which is just short of the threshold. In terms of the bare minimum threshold for Enjo, his pyro res needs to be at least 35% for an 18-second rotation, and 40% for a 20-second rotation. This is also assuming he's not losing any more HP from external sources. Moving on to his first Ascension passive, when Enjo consumes Embered Knowledge from his burst, he gains a 0.35% pyro res bonus, which lasts for the duration of his burst. If he casts his burst before the duration ends, the pyro res is recalculated. If we assume that you run Enjo in a team that maxes out the Embered Knowledge, he can gain a maximum of 35% pyro resistance, which does hit the threshold he'd want for full uptime in an 18-second rotation. In the scenario he's only casting his burst at the bare minimum of 60 points, he gets a 21% res bonus. And so, external sources of pyro resistance, such as Lava Walker, allow him to still have a solid amount for this stat, even in teams that don't reach the max Embered Knowledge threshold. But if you're already running a team that provides the full 35% from his A1 passive, you might be able to get away with a different artifact set. But of course, I want to push him towards that Lava Walker set, so his next passive will directly encourage the pyro resistance stat. When Enjo or the active party member deals damage to an opponent affected by pyro, the damage is further increased, scaling on Enjo's attack, multiplied by a ratio based on his pyro resistance bonus. This effect is Enjo's only form of team utility. The way the bonus is calculated is the same formula that Arlecchino uses. Her bonus scales on her attack multiplied by her bond of life. The theme of Enjo using the same mechanic as Arlecchino wasn't a coincidence. Arlecchino's power is a result of her descending from the Crimson Moon bloodline, and this power is abyssal in nature. Enjo himself is a member of the Abyss Order, and naturally uses abyssal power. The Crimson Moon bloodline is also part of Conrian history. I don't think it was ever confirmed if Enjo himself is Conrian, but at the very least, the Abyss Order originates from that nation. So making these two use the same formula is a nod to their similar ties with the Abyss and Conrian lore. That'll be it for Enjo's main kit. So let's do a quick overview and explore which teams he was designed around. Enjo is a character who deals various forms of pyro damage, which makes him a standard off-fielder, but his A4 directly boosts his and the active character's damage based on the enemy also being affected by pyro. This pushes him to run a team where pyro is the prevalent aura. You may have noticed that Enjo is a unit who functions very similarly to Durin. I made this kit design back in version 5.8, around the time when Enjo's Lava Walker reveal occurred, so technically, I came up with the idea before any Durin leaks came out. At the time of 5.8, the best off-field appliers were Xiangling and Mawika. Because Enjo's Lava Walker kit relies on pyro auras, I wanted to make him the new alternative or best option as a pyro applier, a character with application on par with Xiangling, and utilize the Lini pyro aura mechanic to push him less as a trigger. Now, Durin exists, and he has a pretty similar kit to Enjo. So as I go through the teams for Enjo, it'll be good to explore how he and Durin compare and contrast in performance. For teams like Burning, Overload, or Pyro Swirl/Crystallize, I imagine balancing the hypothetical damage like this. Non-Hexeride Durin teams would be weaker than Enjo, but Hexeride Durin teams would be stronger than Enjo. An example would be the Kniech Burning team. Back in 6.2 when it was just Durin, my premium team would be Kniech, Emily, Durin, and either Bennett or Eonsan. I found the Bennett team to be around 81k DPS. Since Durin was non-Hexerai, he could only provide 20% resistance shred, and Bennett could only buff Kniech's damage. My Nicole and Durin team was a lot stronger. Nicole provides a team-wide attack buff, but the Hexerai activation also means Nicole's artifact gave a 40% Dendro and Pyro damage bonus, along with Durin giving 35% res shred instead of 20%. And that DPS came out to around 116k. Enjo isn't Hexerai, nor does he have any sort of strict mechanic in the first place. He's a very generalist pick, making him way less restricted in team building, so I do want to balance him accordingly. I think a team of Kniech, Emily, Enjo, and either Bennett, Eonsan, Nicole would be somewhere in between the two numbers I tested. In this team, Enjo could also be comparable to Emily, so let's say I run a team of Kniech, Enjo, and then Nicole and Durin. I would probably say that Enjo deals slightly less damage compared to Emily, but his A4 being able to buff him and Kniech makes up for that slightly lower value. For most of his teams, you can imagine him to work similarly to Lini. His A4 passive also relies on him dealing damage to pyro-affected enemies, so whatever team he can work in, Enjo should as well. Of course, Lini and Enjo work really well together due to their shared mechanics. And now, I must move on to the other teams before I ramble about my dear Twink Magician for another 20 minutes. Burning teams are a no-brainer because a burning aura is also considered a pyro aura. Overload teams are a little more finicky as pyro aura uptime is better in triple pyro solo electro, rather than a double-double comp. General Pyro Swirl and Crystallize teams shouldn't have any issues with uptime, so you can keep the aura in these teams pretty consistent as well. As a side note, Enjo can work in Chaska teams to contribute a Pyro Bullet for her, but if he's a solo Pyro unit, the Pyro aura uptime will likely be lower. You might want to run a double Pyro team to help with Pyro uptime, or you just pray to RNGesus that the auras line up properly. While his transformative teams make him compete with Durin in terms of their playstyle, Enjo plays very differently when it comes to Vaporize and Melt. For one, his rate of application is way different from Durin. His burst is a consistent 2-second ICD, which is the same as Light Mode Durin or Off-Field Mawika. His skill is a 2.5-second ICD, but as a coordinated attack, and this makes him identical to Dea's skill. Because I use the same ICD mechanics as existing characters, we're actually able to playtest certain teams to see if a Pyro Aura can be maintained. I mainly use this to test out the Forward Vape and Reverse Melt teams to see if the Pyro application was fast enough for certain characters. And if it wasn't, I whipped out a Dendro character for burning variants, which did open up a few new avenues. Enjo was able to solo apply Pyro for Wriothesley teams, as well as Ganyu, but only if her burst isn't being used. I don't have Mualani, but if Durin or Malwika's 2-second ICD is fast enough, I'm sure Enjo's able to solo apply here as well. Meanwhile, Enjo with burning is fast enough for stuff like a Furina Forward Vape team, as well as Ganyu with her burst active. I even tried looking at Xingqiu and Yelan, and it turns out the burning aura is fast enough for these Hydro drivers to vaporize their hits consistently. Now, onto the other aspect that makes Enjo and Durin function very differently in Vape and Melt. Durin's teams focus on Durin being the one triggering the reactions. While his light mode's faster application is better for setting up a reaction, it doesn't really do anything for his or his team's damage. Meanwhile, Enjo's passives push him to be a Pyro enabler. He and the active character deal more damage when it's an opponent affected by Pyro. On top of him dealing higher damage against these enemies, units like Mualani, Wriothesley, or Ganyu can deal higher damage as well. To summarize, Enjo is better for enabling, Forward Vape, and Reverse Melt with a Hydro or Cryo DPS. Durin will be better for triggering, Reverse Vape, and Forward Melt with a Hydro or Cryo enabler. Let's wrap up with Enjo's builds and his signature weapon. For artifact stats, you want Attack on the Sands and Crit on the Circlet. For the Goblet, you have your choice of Pyro damage for higher personal damage, or Attack if you want to provide a higher boost to the A4 passive. For substats, focus on Crit and Attack as your main, and honestly, your only targets. EM isn't that useful since Enjo will enable a Pyro Aura, not trigger Pyro reactions. And then ER is completely useless because he doesn't use the traditional energy system. For his best sets, obviously, Lava Walker is the top choice. Tiny Miracle provides 20% elemental resistance bonus, and its 4-piece effect grants another 30% when taking the corresponding elemental damage. Enjo deals self-inflicted damage to himself, which can activate the Pyro resistance, but it seems to be reliant on being on-field, so uptime is basically halved if you don't swap in midway through the rotation. It's also a 4-star set, so you lose out on a few stats. Defender's Will can provide 30% elemental resistance based on your party's element, but there's not much use for the 30% defense bonus on its 2-piece. But what if you just decide to forego the Pyro resistance build? His damage is pretty split between skill and burst damage, so Golden Troop is only half valuable. Meanwhile, Finale of the Deep Galleries provides a 60% burst damage bonus, which can be useful, but it won't do anything for Enjo's skill damage. Vorukasha's Glow may not have use for the 20% HP bonus, but the 4-piece grants up to 50% skill and burst damage when the user takes damage. The self-inflicted pyro damage Enjo takes is a valid source for this effect, so this is a good piece. Finally, Unfinished Reverie is only good for burning teams, but if you run him there, the 18% attack and 50% damage bonus is better than Vorukasha. And if you play him on field, sets like Marushasei or Vermilion Hereafter can provide useful stats. For weapons, once again, I decided to make Enjo a sword user because I felt he would have more options compared to a Catalyst build. Starting off with free choices, Enjo can run Finale of the Deep for a strong attack booster. If you give him enough pyro resistance and generate enough Embered Knowledge in a rotation, he can heal himself enough to clear the sword's Bond of Life and still bring him up to max HP. Moonweaver's Dawn is only a burst damage weapon, which isn't too good for his skill damage, but it relies on the user having lower energy costs to max out. Enjo is a 0 energy character, so he can get the full burst damage bonus. It's a free sword from a world quest, so only the refinements are locked behind gacha. Speaking of, for the gacha or battle pass options, Lion Roar provides a damage bonus against pyro or electro affected enemies, which Enjo already wants. Wolfang provides a skill and burst damage bonus, but the crit rate effect is on-field reliant, so he's a bit hindered there for his off-field playstyle. For 5-star choices, Athame Artiste provides an attack bonus to Enjo and the active character when he deals burst damage, so you can use it for a semi-support build. Finally, Azure Light is his best alternative choice. As a 0 energy character, he can get 22% crit rate, 48% attack, and 40% crit damage. And this means designing his signature has a lot to live up to. I chose not to go down the 0 energy pathway just to challenge myself a little bit. Instead, I focused more on his self-damaging mechanic. Time Shattered Dark Flare has a 674 base attack and a 44.1% crit damage bonus. At R1, when the user casts their skill or burst, they'll increase all elemental resistance by 12%. If the user takes damage, their attack is increased by 28% for 4 seconds. If that damage doesn't exceed more than 5% of their max HP, they also gain a 16% crit rate bonus for 4 seconds. And both effects can be triggered while off-field. At its core, the sword provides some elemental resistance to help with Enjo's pyro resistance scaling. If you're able to max out his A1 passive, you can gain a total of 47% pyro resistance. This is already a solid amount for his burst uptime, and as such, you might have the freedom to go for a different build other than Lava Walker. Enjo deals self-inflicted damage, which enables the attack bonus no problem. He only self-damages based on 6% of his max HP. With even a small amount of additional pyro res, he'll basically go below the 5% threshold no problem. Since the effect is based on taking damage and not simple HP loss, you can't use Furina's team-wide HP drain as a means to enable the sword. So while I made Enjo a sword user to give him extra sword options, I didn't design the sword to be flexible on other characters. So it's very much a shill weapon. If you want to enable this on other characters, I think the only way is by playing a sword on-fielder in a Bloom or Burning team, where you can take a minimal amount of damage per tick. Alright, that's gonna do it for this episode of Character Creator. I don't expect Enjo to actually be a playable unit, but I loved the world quest that revealed he was either the Lava Walker or had deep connections to him. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Enjo's kit. What did you like, what would you change, and what alternative ideas do you have? Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!